The opulent silence of Buckingham Palace shattered when a confidential decision was leaked. The royal family trust, a pillar of generational wealth, would now be handed over exclusively to Prince William's lineage. But as news trickled through gilded corridors, one man was notably absent from the celebration: Prince Andrew. His expressionless silence wasn't confusion, it was collapse. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The Royal Family Trust was never just about money, it was legacy cast in gold, a vessel of centuries-old power meant to ensure stability across generations. Established in the shadows of monarchy, it quietly fed royal initiatives, purchased residences, funded ceremonies, and protected the crown from scandal through discreet payments. For decades, it served as the silent heart of the House of Windsor. Yet now, with one ruthless stroke, that lifeline had been cut from Prince Andrew. The internal memo was short and surgical. It was never meant for public consumption, but it found its way into royal hands and then into trembling lips and pale expressions. Select royals gathered under the pretense of a family luncheon, yet the atmosphere was one of veiled panic. Only those within the most trusted inner circle knew the truth. A seismic financial realignment had occurred, and it was irreversible. Andrew's name was nowhere in the new structure. His daughters were omitted. The wording was final. The trust would now feed exclusively into the line of William, Prince of Wales. The corridors of the palace buzzed in hushed tones. Andrew was missing from the gathering, no messages, no calls, no fury, just absence. For a man so accustomed to proximity, not power, the silence screamed louder than any outburst. Whispers flickered through the staff. He wasn't warned. One said, clutching an envelope she dared not open. In Andrew's private suite, the atmosphere was disturbingly still. Curtains remained drawn. No aides called upon. The television remained on mute, its screen replaying a smiling William attending a charity gala with Catherine. It wasn't just exclusion, it was erasure. A calculated redirection of royal energy that Andrew had once presumed he'd remain tethered to, even if by thread. Camilla's reaction was laced in quiet triumph. She didn't speak of it aloud, but her eyes revealed everything as she sipped from her teacup while nodding in approval. Princess Anne, ever the sentinel of duty, was seen exiting the royal chambers early, her expression unreadable but her silence complicit. They had known, they had all known. Andrew hadn't just been removed, he had been forgotten, his ties to the trust surgically cut in a move so silent it bore the fingerprints of strategic mercy, or revenge. But to understand why the crown turned so definitively against Andrew, we must go back to the fracture no one dared revisit. Until now. Long-buried scandals don't die in royalty, they echo. And when it comes to Prince Andrew, those echoes are deafening. The trust decision wasn't just about finances, it was retribution. Decades in the making. The fall didn't begin with the announcement. It began years earlier, under the heavy shadow of scandal that refused to dissipate. Whispers turned into headlines, headlines into investigations, and while the palace stood stoic before the cameras, behind the scenes, the foundations of trust, both literal and symbolic, were cracking beneath Andrew's feet. His controversial associations with disgraced figures became more than just a PR nightmare. They became an institutional threat. Charles, then still adjusting to his role as monarch, found himself navigating a storm he didn't create, but could no longer ignore. The palace had long practiced the art of strategic silence, but even silence has a breaking point, and William Young, observant, calculating, had seen enough. While others tried to repair the optics, he began quietly distancing himself. The gulf between uncle and nephew widened in private long before it showed in public. William wasn't just protecting his image, he was preparing for war. What no one realized at the time was that Queen Elizabeth had seen the writing on the wall too. In her final months, sources claim, she sought to protect Andrew, issuing private assurances that he would not be left entirely in the cold. But the shield she offered wasn't armor, it was parchment, paper thin, easily forgotten, and swept away in the winds of transition. As Meghan and Harry's royal exit detonated across global headlines, the palace's internal hierarchy began to recalibrate. The public's attention shifted from one crisis to another, But internally, the Sussex departure acted like a prism, throwing light on who remained within the fold and who no longer served the crown's future. Andrew was no longer just controversial, he was inconvenient, and convenience has always been currency inside Buckingham Palace. In early 2025, those closest to the crown reignited hushed talks of legacy protection, not just for optics, but for the future of the monarchy's financial and moral authority. Advisors, once quietly loyal to Andrew, began revising their stance. Conversations became colder, appointments were missed, messages went unanswered. Princess Anne and Prince Edward, long known for their sense of duty, were drawn into discreet meetings with senior legal officials. The question posed wasn't whether Andrew should be excluded, it was whether the integrity of the institution could survive if he wasn't. These meetings weren't arguments, they were verdicts in the making. And through it all, William remained publicly calm, but privately resolute. He had grown up learning that power doesn't always roar, it often whispers, then strikes. As pressure mounted behind palace doors, William took a step. Not even Charles foresaw a step that would change everything. He didn't need a throne to exert power. William, Prince of Wales, orchestrated a silent maneuver that would tilt the axis of royal inheritance, winning favour with old allies and alienating blood. Long before the memo was leaked, William had already started redrawing the lines of legacy. While Andrew lingered in the shadows of royal disgrace, William was cultivating something far more enduring than popularity. He was securing authority. Quietly, methodically, and with deliberate patience, he positioned himself not just as the future king, but as the present-day guardian of royal integrity. The royal family trust was no longer just a financial instrument, it had become a symbol of generational control. And William, with Catherine at his side, began to move pieces across the board that even his father didn't fully grasp. Whispers of meetings with the Lord Chamberlain intensified. Legal advisors, many of whom had served under Queen Elizabeth, were summoned in secrecy. Their instructions were precise, their loyalties tested. William wasn't seeking their opinion, he was handing them a vision and expecting compliance. Catherine, never one to chase the spotlight, played her role with refined precision. She approached the senior trustees with calm authority, invoking stability, the children, the future of the crown. Her words were measured, but her intent was unmistakable. The monarchy must be protected from within, and that meant eliminating lingering liabilities. With William leading the legal front and Catherine winning hearts behind closed doors, the path to restructuring the trust became not just plausible, but inevitable. Public support, too, leaned heavily in William's favour. His clean image, his charitable works, his unwavering composure all served as contrast to Andrew's faded relevance. In the eyes of the British people, there was only one royal son who embodied duty, and William knew it. The decisive moment came one unassuming evening, no press, no spectacle. A sealed vote held behind ancient palace walls, with only the most senior and vetted present. The air was tense, the gravity of the move undeniable. One by one, signatures were laid on paper, the ink binding a future that would sever ties with a tainted past. William didn't flinch. He didn't need to. He had already won. And when Charles was handed the final document, those who stood in the room say he paused longer than expected. Perhaps it was hesitation. Perhaps it was memory. But in the end, he too signed without a word, but with eyes that carried the weight of something unspoken. But if William was the architect, the ghost of Queen Elizabeth was the shadow hovering over every move. In a locked drawer at Balmoral, a handwritten note surfaced, signed simply Mother. Its message didn't name an heir, but its intent was unmistakable. And for Andrew, it felt like betrayal from beyond the grave. What began as a quiet estate visit by Princess Beatrice unfolded into something far more consequential. She had been tasked with cataloguing personal items left behind in one of the Queen's lesser-used private suites. Inside a faded drawer, tucked between old prayer cards and a family photo album, was a sealed envelope marked only with her grandmother's crest. The contents were brief, measured, graceful, but potent. Queen Elizabeth II had written of her hopes for a new generation of rightful stewards, those who carry not just our name, but our purpose with reverence and clarity. There were no names, but everyone understood who she meant, William, and not Andrew. The contrast was devastating. When Charles read the letter aloud days later, the air in the private royal chamber thickened. His voice cracked only once, but it was enough. This wasn't a policy change. It was a moral confirmation. Anne's reaction was swift and wordless, a nod, cold and absolute. Edward closed his eyes. Camilla said nothing, her expression frozen in something between vindication and pity. But it was Andrew who wasn't in the room, and it was Andrew who had to hear of the letter second-hand. Beatrice, pale and hesitant, was the one who told him, and in that moment something in him gave way. He didn't speak, he didn't rage, he simply left, a door shut behind him that no one tried to open. What followed was a torrent of speculation. Had the letter been withheld from Andrew on purpose? Some claimed Charles knew of it a year prior, others insisted it was hidden by design to avoid exactly this kind of emotional collapse. Whatever the truth, the damage was done. The Queen's final words had served as both a guiding torch and a quiet sword, lifting one branch of the family, while silently severing another. Andrew's world, already fragile, had just cracked beyond repair. As public eyes turned toward William's triumph, Andrew retreated, but his silence soon exploded into defiance. Shattered by exclusion, Prince Andrew didn't weep, he schemed. And in one bold move, he threatened to unravel secrets the monarchy swore would never see light. The revelation of his total removal from the royal family trust hadn't just wounded Andrew, it had ignited something in him that the palace hadn't accounted for. Alone, cornered, and publicly diminished, he did what many feared he might. He picked up the phone and began making calls to the same royal legal advisors who had once protected him. But these weren't gentle requests for clarification. They were demands. Andrew wanted appeal rights, an internal review, a reversal. He insisted on seeing the original documentation, and when politely denied, he shifted his tone. What began as desperation quickly turned into menace. Behind closed doors, he uttered a sentence that sent chills through the palace's legal wing. "I still have the diaries." The Queen's personal archive, long guarded under layers of protection, was rumoured to contain handwritten reflections, private correspondence, and raw admissions never meant for public eyes. Andrew's access had once been unrestricted. He had been a favoured son. Now he hinted that those very documents could become his weapons. The palace had always lived in fear of one thing above all: internal exposure. And Andrew, stripped of his last remaining security blanket, was prepared to risk everything to claw back relevance. Beatrice and Eugenie, caught in the emotional crossfire, found themselves pleading with their father behind palace walls. "This won't fix anything," Eugenie reportedly said, her voice trembling. But Andrew, blinded by betrayal, saw only two choices: disappear quietly or scorch the ground on his way out. Camilla, sensing the storm brewing just beyond the official chain of command, reached out privately, bypassing Charles, in an attempt to reason with Andrew directly. But even she couldn't diffuse what had already been set in motion. Then came the leak. A voicemail, muffled and static-laced, reached the ears of a senior aide and quickly spread among the royal circle. Andrew's voice, unmistakably agitated, declared, "They can't just erase me, not after everything." The message was short, the implications catastrophic. Within hours, palace security protocols were tightened. An unexpected late-night visit to Windsor by Andrew, unannounced, unescorted, set off a chain of panic that led to an emergency meeting at Claren CE House the following morning. This was no longer a passive crisis. It was now an active threat. But as Andrew moved to fight back, an unexpected figure returned bearing legal firepower and personal vengeance. When Prince Harry re-entered the UK under the guise of a charity event, few noticed the flurry of armoured cars outside Clarence's house. He wasn't just visiting, he was joining the war and aligning against Andrew. The headlines focused on his arrival at Heathrow, a scheduled appearance at a veterans fundraiser, and speculation over whether Meghan had stayed behind in California due to health or politics. But those narratives were convenient distractions from the real reason behind Harry's return. Underneath the diplomatic surface, there was a firestorm waiting to ignite, and Harry had chosen to walk directly into it. He had heard the whispers, seen the headlines, and read the internal shifts reshaping the monarchy's future. The exclusion of Prince Andrew from the family trust wasn't just a financial pivot, it was a recalibration of royal alliances. And Harry, long seen as the outcast, recognized a rare opportunity. For once, his fractured bond with the palace could be converted into leverage. Within hours of landing, Harry entered a discreet meeting with William and the Crown Estate's legal team. Their history was bruised, but power has a strange way of forcing reconciliation. Harry offered his support, not out of loyalty but for position. He didn't want back in. He wanted relevance on his terms. In exchange for his endorsement of the trust decision, he asked for key concessions tied to the Sussex Foundation, estate negotiations, and future protections for his children. William, wary but pragmatic, listened. The conversation wasn't warm, it was clinical, strategic, calculated, and it ended with a handshake that neither of them expected to make. Hours later, Charles S. was looped in via a three-way encrypted call from Sandringham. Prince Edward joined quietly from Balmoral. The air was thick with generational tension. Charles, still recovering from the backlash of Andrew's removal, now had to process an alliance between his feuding sons, one that excluded him. Edward, ever the stabilizer, tried to mediate, but the real friction lay between the monarch and the prince who had walked away. Charles questioned motives. Harry defended clarity. No apologies were exchanged, only terms. What emerged was clear. Harry had reinserted himself into the core of royal restructuring, and with timing that blindsided everyone, including Andrew. The fallout was immediate. Andrew's rage was barely containable. Sources close to his household claimed he screamed when he learned of Harry's closed-door meeting with William. For a man already unraveling, the idea that the exiled prince was now wielding influence felt like a final humiliation. It was betrayal, layered upon abandonment. He never cared about the institution, now he wants to control it. Andrew reportedly fumed. But the truth was, Harry's return wasn't about control. It was about positioning, ensuring that if a new era was being carved, his signature wouldn't be erased from its foundation. Then came the leak. A quote from a private conversation splashed across headlines. "This time, I'm choosing sides." The public devoured it. Was it defiance? Was it redemption? No one could say for sure. But what it meant was unmistakable. Harry had stepped back into the royal arena, and this time, his aim was precise. And just when the storm seemed contained, a vault was opened, and what lay inside changed the game completely. Buried beneath layers of ceremonial records and financial reports, a decades-old ledger emerged. Inside, names, amounts, dates, and one red-stamped phrase, stripped. The truth was colder than anyone imagined. It wasn't supposed to be found. Tucked away in a restricted archive marked legacy allocations, confidential, the document had evaded review for years. But after Harry's re-entry and the flurry of legal recalibrations tied to William's exclusive claim to the trust, a senior advisor ordered a full forensic audit of all historical transactions. What they found was not only shocking, it was undeniable. The ledgers stretched back to 1982, charting decades of royal disbursements with meticulous detail. But as the pages turned, one pattern emerged again and again, a steady decline in entries tied to Prince Andrew. What began as generous annual allocations suddenly showed abrupt terminations. Redacted lines, ambiguous footnotes, and tags labeled special review clouded entire sections. There were no explanations, only the conclusion. Andrew's financial privileges hadn't been stripped recently. They had been dwindling long before the public caught on. The Queen, revered for her quiet decisiveness, had evidently begun reducing Andrew's access years prior. No dramatic announcement, no confrontation, just silence, paired with subtraction. And now the proof had surfaced not as rumour, but as written record. In bold ink, one line stood out: account access suspended indefinitely. Authority, sovereign order. The signature wasn't legible. But the date told its own story. It aligned precisely with the time Andrew first faced internal scrutiny for his associations abroad. Legal advisors were swift in their analysis. The ledger didn't just support William's claim it destroyed Andrew's. It proved the monarchy had already made its decision long ago. What was unfolding now was merely the formalization of a process already in motion. The discovery crushed the last sliver of hope. Andrew clung to that somehow the trust's decision had been rash, reverend, irascible, or politically motivated. The ink told a different truth. His exclusion had been deliberate, calculated, and worst of all matriarchal. It was his mother's hand, not William's, that began the severance. In Andrew's circle, disbelief curdled into quiet devastation. The revelation not only confirmed his financial isolation, but rewrote the very narrative he had clung to for years. He hadn't been edged out by scheming relatives or media pressure. He had been written out by the one person he believed would always protect him. The final stroke had not been legal, but maternal. And once that truth was laid bare, the game was no longer about appeal or redemption. Now cornered, not by enemies but by family, Andrew had one move left: to disappear or to destroy. The palace gates were closed, but the world watched. Prince Andrew, once second in line, now stood utterly alone, his legacy fractured, his fortune lost, and his title teetering on the edge of ceremonial extinction. It was not a fall, it was an unmaking. Over weeks of hushed meetings and brutal legal precision, Andrew's name was removed from every royal trustee board that had once anchored his identity. The same committees he had proudly chaired now sent him formal letters, cold, thankless, and final. There would be no further briefings, no votes, no opinions requested. His access was revoked and his role obsolete. The palace didn't make an announcement. It didn't need to. The silence spoke volumes, and in that silence a single plea emerged from his daughter. Beatrice, composed but visibly shaken, sent a handwritten letter to William. It was not a demand. It was a daughter's final appeal for mercy. She asked only for time, for reconsideration, for dignity. She reminded William of shared childhoods, of their bond as cousins. She ended it with a single line: "Please don't let him disappear this way." But William D already made his decision, and this time even compassion had a boundary. The monarchy could no longer afford sentiment. At Royal Lodge, Andrew sat alone. His routine collapsed, his staff reduced, his once coveted visitors now absent. There were no public appearances, no planned engagements, just long days in quiet exile. A man who had lived in entitlement now found himself consumed by irrelevance. The final blow came not from Parliament or the press, but from his own blood. Charles, informed of the final ruling and the legal finalization of the trust, declined a personal meeting. No confrontation, no last words, just a sealed envelope delivered through a courier. The king, it seemed, had nothing left to say. The restructuring of the royal family trust was now complete. Its terms were binding, its leadership redefined. William's lineage had been cemented as the sole beneficiaries and overseers. The document, once whispered about, was now law. And within the palace, sources quietly confirmed what many had long suspected: Andrew was no longer consulted on family affairs. His voice, once powerful, once feared, was now just an echo in a chamber that had moved on without him. But as the nation looked toward a future shaped by William, one question loomed: what of Andrew's daughters and the legacy they were promised? As the dust settled on the most divisive inheritance battle in modern royal history, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie faced a cruel truth: their father's legacy could no longer protect them. And a new royal gatekeeper had risen: William. For Beatrice, the shift came swiftly. Days before she was scheduled to represent a key royal patronage in Oxford, her name was quietly removed from the event itinerary. No explanation, no replacement, just absence. Those close to her described a visible change: less confident, more withdrawn. She declined interviews, declined appearances. Behind palace doors, it was understood, her father's disgrace had not stayed confined to him. It now radiated through his daughters, threatening to erase the only roles they had left. Eugenie, more restrained but no less shaken, chose a different path. She requested a private audience, not with William, but with Catherine. It was not political, it was human. a conversation between women who understood the fine line between duty and survival. What was said remains locked behind Kensington's walls, but insiders claim Eugenie left with her head held higher than when she arrived. William, now the definitive steward of the Crown's future, made his position painfully clear in a closed session with senior advisors. The future must begin clean. He said neither cruel nor compassionate, simply resolute. The message was unmistakable. The era of quiet indulgences was over. But while Andrew's name drew scorn, his daughters drew sympathy. The British public, often divided on royal matters, began to coalesce around a new sentiment: why should the daughters suffer for the sins of the father? Social sentiment shifted, media softened, and in that wave of empathy, a note arrived at Beatrice's residence. Handwritten, from Catherine, it offered no promises, no guarantees, only a quiet invitation to talk. It was more than protocol, it was compassion extended from one generation to another. Behind the scenes, murmurs hinted that William wasn't entirely unmoved. Though the family trust had been sealed under his lineage, advisors hinted at potential auxiliary provisions contingent, monitored and independent of Andrew. Nothing official had changed, but the possibility itself was enough to open the smallest window of hope. If the daughters were to be reabsorbed into the royal structure, it would be under new conditions, ones William alone would define. And so, the royal line strengthens, but not without casualties. Prince Andrew may be broken, but the consequences of this trust war have only begun to shape the future of the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.